Hello my lovelies, welcome to True Crime with me, Emma Kenny. I'm going to say before I start today that I'm a little bit croaky as I've developed some kind of bizarre chest infection. I blame the wedding I went to last week. They were vectors of transmission of some snotty cold. But nonetheless, if you can handle my croakiness, I will continue in spite of it, because if there's one thing I'm good for, it's a bit of consistency where crime is concerned. I release content on a Wednesday and a Sunday, so if you are into crime and you do think that consistency is an important theme, then this is the channel for you. So get those notifications on, subscribe, write me a comment, send me some kind of healing vibes, maybe some home remedies. Whiskey, that's good. Brandy, I think that works as well. I'm just going to share that with you. My grandma convinced me as a child that whiskey and brandy was an effective treatment for pretty much, any illness at all. So whenever I get sick, I'm like, get me some brandy or some whiskey. And I don't know whether it's just because it makes you drunk that you don't feel that ill or whether it really does work. But nonetheless, last night I had it and I'm here today in spite of going slightly hot and cold, even whilst I'm saying this to you now. But I digress. Thank you to all of you, by the way, who are helping me out on Patreon. I really, really appreciate it. There's a link below. As I always say, absolutely no pressure. Patreon tends to have bits and bobs of my life that wouldn't ordinarily put out there unless it's paid for, because I think I'd get into trouble. But for those of you who are doing, thank you. For those of you who can't, it doesn't matter. You support me every single time you come here. And if you haven't joined me for a live premiere, please do. The community is awesome. I can't tell you how much I love my Wednesday and Sunday chats with you guys. So if you're new, just join in. It's the friendliest group of people that you will ever meet. And no doubt, whenever you are listening to this, whether it's a week after I've released it, the day I've released it, or in 2 or 3 years' time, I promise you it's well worth joining because they are so lovely. Today's case is one that I have so much history with. So much history with. I presented a couple of shows on terrestrial TV about this particular killing, and also it's one that stayed with me because of the fact that my own children were a very similar age to the individual who lost his life. And I've always wanted to do a deeper dive into this, primarily because I don't often get to say all the things that I need to say when I'm talking about these kind of crimes, and also because Breck Bednar was a young man who resonated with me for all the right reasons. He was your perfect child. And I'm going to be really honest, he came from a perfect family. One of the things that you're going to learn about Breck and his family today is that if there was a pen portrait of possibility of perfection when it came down to the way you should deal with online grooming, Lauren, his mother, nailed it. And Breck still lost his life. And I want to kind of explore that a little bit further. So like I said, even though I know that people will have covered this case, you'll have seen documentaries on it, you've probably seen documentaries with me in it, because like I said, I've been in several and presented at least 2. Nonetheless, I think there's areas of the story that need to be retold and told again and again and again. Because right now, out there are many, many children and young people at risk of online grooming, predators from paedophiles, right down to people like Lewis Daynes, who in this case became a murderer. Breck was born March 17th, 1999. He lived with his parents, Lauren Lefebvre and Barry Bednar. And he also had 3 siblings who were triplets. So that's amazing, isn't it? Triplets, Chloe, Carly and Sebastian. They were born in 2002. So really quite close together and very close family. They lived in Caterham, Surrey. They were a very affluent family, I would say that. Barry worked in the oil trading industry. I don't think it was always that simple. When you look up reports about the Bednar family, it will classically say millionaire and so on and so forth. But I think that they had some difficult times, which we'll talk about later on. Breck's parents were originally from the US and they moved to the UK in 1996. Around 2008, Lauren and Barry split up and Barry moved out. But I have to say, it was one of those relationship breakdowns that didn't have a huge impact on the children as regards them feeling alienation between parents, because Barry was still massively involved in their lives. And I think that Lauren and Barry remained in really good communication and acted really positively as co-parents. Certainly that's my experience of them. And when I've listened to Lauren, and I've listened to Lauren a lot because I've been in shows with her, one of the things that's very clear is the children were consistently their priority. They were always very much at the forefront. As a loving parent, I think that's exactly how you should be, but I'm saying that because it sets up the tone for how these children were being brought up in a very loved environment, in a very safe environment, an environment where even when things didn't work out, they were still the centre of the world and their needs were prioritised. Breck actually spent every other weekend with his dad. People who knew Breck said he was extraordinary. And it's not one or two people who were close to him who said he was extraordinary. It's everybody who met him. They said he was incredibly compassionate, unbelievably caring. He was somebody who was always considered positive, happy-go-lucky. But also Lauren said that he was quite a relaxed boy as well, so quite easygoing. One of the things that he found really simple was education. He was a straight A student, a real straight A student. He also attended the Army Training Corps because one of the things that he wanted to do was potentially be a pilot. But he also had this huge love of technology. He was obsessed with technology. But it's very clear that as a young person, Breck is moving in all the right ways. If I had had a child of his age doing the things that he was doing, I would have thought, pat on the back. My kids didn't do and haven't done things like he did. And I'm okay with acknowledging that realistically, Lauren was probably doing a better job in encouraging her child to become a really healthy, happy human. I'm not being down on myself. I'm just saying that as I tell this story, it's going to be hard to say anything about Lauren and Barry aside from hugely positive things as parents. They got the A grade on knowing how to bring children up. I really mean that. And I'm saying that because of the fact that every single one of their children examples similar traits to Breck. So it's really challenging telling you this story because we know where it's going to go. We know it's not going to end well. And it's just really important and integral to this that I keep reminding you throughout that these adults in these children's lives worked so hard to keep them safe, worked so hard to educate them in a way that meant that they'd have the best futures. And that's the poignancy of this story, because it should not happen to anyone, right? None of us should lose a child to murder, none of us. But when you look at the ingredients that these parents were throwing into these children's lives to ensure a positive outcome, it's a stark reminder of just how dangerous worlds can be, even when, to all intents and purposes, they're living a perfect life. When Breck hit his teens, it was noticeable to his family that there were changes in that happy-go-lucky mood. He became a little bit more irritable. One of the things that he stopped doing was going to church with the family. Again, I don't think that's unusual. How many of us got to like 13 and woke up going, I'm hormonal and I hate everything? Like, I think that you get to be a teenager and you start realising that you can say no. I think most of us accept that. You get to 13 and you're like, I have realised that I'm too big to drag physically where you want me to go, so I'm just going to slam a door and say no. So I think this is really contextual, but it's noticed by his family. And he also started to miss his army training corps, which was unusual. But around this time, he also starts escalating the amount of technological time that he's having. So he's in his room, on his computer constantly. If you're under 25, you're going to be like, this is completely normal. I know, it is. For my generation, it wasn't. Remember, we used to have phones attached to walls with cords and some people locked them. At the end of the day, technology has gone crazy. But for me, it's really strange imagining spending hours and hours and hours playing a game on a headset. I can't connect with it, but my kids completely connect with that because it's like a youth club in their head. They're on headsets chatting to the mates, right? But this seems to incrementally increase. And one of the reasons I think that this happened was Breck had to leave his private school. So in year 9, unfortunately, for whatever reason, his father couldn't afford the fees. And that meant that Breck had to go to another school. I think we can all appreciate that for an A grade student who was just nailing it, To have to move, to have that transition is going to be tough. You've got your friends, you've got your connections and peers that you kind of experience and encounter day to day. You know where you're going, you know what you're doing, and life feels quite simple, right? And then all of a sudden, you have to leave. And you don't just have to leave, you have to leave because of finances. So that can be quite upsetting, can't it? It's nobody's fault at all. Although part of me wants to go, you had an A-grade student, maybe you could just have given him a subsidiary place, but I don't make the rules. But nonetheless, that would have been an upheaval. When he goes to his new school, he actually meets lots of his friends from primary school. So it's not like it's a bad transition, but I think we have to note that any upheaval as a teenager, particularly when you're already settled, is going to be something that you would rather avoid. But nonetheless, starts to reconnect, and that means reconnecting them online as well. So that means every evening after school, he goes home, gets online, starts chatting with them. And they used a program called TeamSpeak. That's one where you can communicate and play games. It's a voice technology, not a video technology, but it just means that you've got that virtual youth club going on. He was part of this 6-person gaming club, and that comprised of his school friends and also one other person. And this was somebody that Lauren didn't know, his mother didn't know who he was, and he was called Lewis Daynes. Lauren was the most scrupulous parent when it came down to online activity. She used to make Breck have his door open. That in itself, when I first did a show about Breck's death, really made me think. Because I didn't make my kids have the door open. And I really ruminated on that. Because she was right. How do you know what's going on with your children unless you're checking in with them? And what she did in telling her story is she got me to start checking in on what my kids were doing. And I'll tell you a little bit later on about what that led to. But it made a difference to my own children's lives. So she hears on this kind of voice chat what she considers as a man's voice. So it was distinctly different from the adolescent voices that she was listening to. So she asked, who's this guy? So Breck actually shows who's on screen. And Lauren said when she looked at this picture, it was kind of an attractive 13-year-old boy, but it clearly didn't match the voice. And one of the things that was really obvious from pretty much the get-go was he sounded really controlling. It didn't sound like an ordinary adolescent 14-year-old. He sounded domineering. So Lauren decides that she's going to speak to him, and it's clear immediately that he's really confident. Overly confident. Remember, Lauren's an adult, a parent of 3, successful. And she's talking to a young man who is on a gaming site with adolescents, and he's acting like he's in control. The fact that he is so confident with her kind of concerns her, and she has a conversation with Breck, and he says, well, the reason that we're involved with Lewis Daynes is because he actually runs the server. That's true. So it appears that Lewis Daynes, at some point in his life, has potentially inherited some money. And some of the things he's done with that is to buy servers. Breck's really impressed with him. He says that Lewis Daynes is this tech genius. He's amazing on the computer. He's teaching them how to code. He's teaching them how to encrypt. Now, I want you to remember what it was like to be 14 years old. And you're talking to this person who owns a server, who seems to know the ins and outs of something you're so captivated by, and is telling you all these amazing things that he has the power to do. Remember what people who are older than you felt like when you were 14. I mean, think about school. I remember starting secondary school at 11 and looking at the girls who were in the last year and thinking they were 42-year-old women who knew everything about the world. That's how we work, yeah? So anybody a bit older than you, you just kind of idolize. Breck even goes on to say that Lewis Daynes told him that he worked in New York City, he was undercover for the FBI, he was in contract work for them. And Lauren is going to listen to this and she's going to be like, this guy is a Walter Mitty. Of course, straight away, she's going to know that this guy is a fantasist. So the other thing is that Lauren's American. So The minute that she gets time to talk to Lewis Daynes when he's online, she starts asking him questions about New York. Of course she does. She wants to show Breck that Lewis Daynes is lying to him. But of course, Lewis has always got an excuse for why he's too busy. You know, he's always working, so he can't have that conversation. But that makes no sense, because he's literally constantly gaming online with his son. So how is he busy working when he's constantly online? And how is he too busy to answer those questions? But Breck doesn't connect with her fears. Breck's just really excited. He's got this new friendship with this older guy who loves what he loves. And he connects with him in so many ways because Daynes has basically been gaming forever, right? So that means that he's got miles more experience and he's going to be able to help him in numerous ways. And he also says that the friends that he's in that group with, who he's now going to school with, they've been gaming with Lewis Daynes for years. So he's trying to kind of tell Lauren, look, there is trust already built here. That means that Lauren, to some degree, did think, okay, you know, I want my child to fit in. I want him to feel safe. I want him to enjoy himself. And he's telling me that all these guys know Lewis Daynes, and that's enough, essentially, to mean that she backed off a little bit. But what she didn't stop noticing was the huge influence that Lewis Daynes was having over Breck. And I mean, it was noticeable. In fact, one of the things that's really starting to grate on Lauren is the way that Lewis Daynes infiltrates the way that her son responds to simple things that she would ask Breck to do. So going to church or doing housework, and Breck says, well, Lewis says I don't have to do house chores, I don't make any mess. Or Lewis says I don't have to go to church anymore. Can you imagine how frustrating that would be? Like, patience is a virtue, I know. But if my kids were saying that to me, I would feel beyond rageful, because the way that Lewis Daynes was infecting this absolutely loved young man was just so deeply worrying, because it's not like Breck. This is not the kind of behaviour that anybody expects from him. And secondly, it's really disrespectful. Lewis says I don't need to do the housework. Lewis says I don't need to go to church. Well, Lewis can come and pay the mortgage then, can't he? Do you know what I mean? That's the way you want to respond, isn't it? Lewis can come and cook your meals. Lewis can drive you to all of your activities. Because the reality is that Lewis Daynes needs to back off, right? But what's that saying about the power, the domineering, the control? And what do people who are trying to isolate you do? They start breaking down the relationships that are closest to you. And this is where you can almost see the coercive control beginning. Now, obviously we're talking here about predatory online grooming as well, but I think we have to acknowledge the coercive control level. What coercive controllers do is they convince you that everybody else's relationships are secondary. The only relationship that matters is with them. They build trust with you to a degree where you are willing to sacrifice the people that mean the most to you in your world, because they convince you that they are better for you, that they know better for you, that they can do better for you. And Breck comes from this incredibly loving home, yet Lewis Daynes, in spite of Breck's intelligence, in spite of Breck's support network, in spite of Breck's experience of his life, which has been a good life, he still is investing his trust in this man who he doesn't really know based on false promises. Because he genuinely thinks that what Lewis Daynes is saying about helping him in his future, about providing him with things that he's desperate to achieve, like in technology and so on and so forth, that this is worth following and pursuing. And because his mum is getting in the way of that, he's starting to alienate her. Because like I said, he isn't aware that he's being coercively controlled. This is about Lewis Daynes manipulating him by isolating him from every relationship that matters. And that's what a coercive controller wants to do. It is paramount to start you resenting the relationships that can support you. Because a relationship that can support you can get in the way of the control that the individual taking you away from the people who mean the most to you can do. Lauren actually describes the relationship between Lewis Daynes and Breck as Breck being almost like a puppet. So she was constantly being told through Breck how she should be parenting him. Breck also announces that basically Lewis Daynes has organised an apprenticeship at Microsoft for him, saying that he doesn't even need to finish school. Now, on one level, if you are in a situation where you're presented with an amazing opportunity, then of course you're going to want to take it. Like if somebody had said to me when I was 15, hey Emma, just screw education entirely, we've got this amazing job and you're going to have an amazing time, it's going to be fantastic and you get paid like 4 times as much as you would do if you went on a normal career, do you want to do it? I'd be like, yes, I'll definitely do it. You know what I mean? But obviously I would want to know that the person that was arranging it did actually have the contacts, and they want to see a contract of employment and probably go on an office tour. You know, I'm not saying that amazing opportunities don't happen sometimes, but you can see that Breck is desperate for this relationship to lead somewhere positive. You know, he wants to work in tech. He wants to believe that Lewis Daynes is the knight in shining armour to some degree. And the fact that Lewis Daynes is using this level of manipulation, using this level of control, we are being introduced, aren't we, to some psychopathic traits here. Because he wants to use complete fantasy to change the course of a young child's life. The truth about Daynes, by the way, when we actually look at who he is a 19-year-old, unemployed computer engineer. It gets better when I tell you a little bit more about him. So yeah, this FBI agent, contract work in New York. Yeah, he's just unemployed. He lived alone since he was 16, and I'm going to say that's hard. 16-year-olds should not live alone. We've failed in society when a 16-year-old kid doesn't have the right support network around them, that they have to go and live in a flat by themselves. It's awful. Like, most 16-year-olds struggle to make toast, let alone pay bills, be organised and support themselves, right? But nonetheless, he has been in the care system to some degree, and consequently he's ended up independently living at 16. He starts running this gaming club, which he's bought this server. He bought a few servers to some degree. He'd come into some money, but it's obvious that he wanted to have some kind of levels of control, right? He was buying these servers, so he had connections with young people, and so he was in charge, right? He was in charge. Bit of a psychopathic trait there as well. As I always say, I can't diagnose that he's the psychopath, by the way. I'm just saying, let's look at the traits. Also, pathological liar. I think we can say that he's a pathological liar. Why? Let's just go through it a little bit. Well, one, he told the boys he was a multi-millionaire. He claimed that he worked for the US Defense Department. He claimed that he was working all over the world. He actually lived in a flat in Grays, Essex. Also, he claimed, pièce de résistance here, that he'd made $2 million in Bitcoin trades, but he'd given it all to Syrian rebels. Yeah. $2 million in Bitcoin trades, and he was like, I am so zen and so caring that I'm going to give it all to Syrian rebels. I don't even know how you do that. Like, is there like a Syrian rebels GoFundMe? I don't know. Basically, most of the things that he said, it's that classic, you can tell he's lying when his mouth is moving. He obviously loved the control that he had over the group, and the manipulation, again, another psychopathic trait, starts turning boys against one another. That's something that he does really cleverly. That's part of the grooming process, isn't it? And one of the things that really upsets Breck is that he actually tells him that the boys have had a conversation with him and they say they hate Breck. I know for a lot of you, you'll be like, well, maybe he could have had that conversation with those friends and said, do you really hate me? But then I want you to remember what it was like when you thought people were bitching behind your back when you're that age. Very few of us confront that. We just feel awkward, sad, neglected, abandoned, rejected, all of those things. They're really challenging feelings to experience. And if somebody that we trust, if somebody that we believe says, I need to tell you this, it's really difficult for me, but these guys are slagging you off and they're saying they hate you, that would blindside Breck. And it would also make him trust Lewis Daynes more. Because remember, he's invested so much in him. He's invested so many beliefs in him. If he decides that Lewis Daynes is a liar, what does he have to give up? He has to give up the idea of this Microsoft apprenticeship. He has to give up this idea of potentially becoming a millionaire. He has to give up all these ideas that he's invested in and turn them back to what his mother's been saying, that Lewis is a liar. So he trusts Lewis. So now Lewis Daynes has got Breck far more isolated than is good for him, and Breck is starting to question the friendships that he has. Again, remember, he's moved school, so he's probably not feeling as anchored to relationships as he would have liked to. So Lewis Daynes has become this consistent force for him, and that means that he grows closer to him. The problem is, the friends that he does have, who he's in those groups with, that Lewis Daynes is saying, are saying nasty things about him, they're actually getting wise to Lewis Daynes. They're starting to really worry. They think he's a fantasist and they don't want to be involved with him anymore. And they actually say to Breck, look, we think this guy is not a good influence. We don't believe him, and we're starting to be a bit concerned about being in groups with him. And Breck just won't listen. And Lewis Daynes would do things such as, when one of Breck Bednar's friends got into a group, he would kick them out of the server. So he literally wouldn't allow the relationships to flourish anymore. He would control who was allowed in and who wasn't. So again, as far as Breck is concerned, Lewis Daynes is his close friend. So it's about a year now that he's known him. That's 12 months of intensely getting to know Lewis Daynes as far as Breck is concerned. And remember, we're talking hours and hours and hours a day online. That's a really intensive relationship. So as far as Breck is concerned, Lewis Daynes is probably his best friend. Now, Lauren, on the other hand, is in a completely different headspace. She's wise to the fact that this relationship is not enhancing her son's life. And one of the things that she starts being really concerned about is that she thinks that Lewis Daynes might be a paedophile. And I'm not surprised, because if you think about how he is trying to alienate friends, isolate him from lots of his family members, constantly make up things that clearly aren't true, sounds a lot older when he's online than his picture. So these things make sense to Lauren, that this could definitely be somebody who was trying to groom her son. So she starts trying to limit the computer time that he has. And even though she's trying hard to do that, it's very hard to break Breck off in this way. So even though she's saying to Breck, you need to spend more time with the family, you need to spend less time online with Lewis, it just doesn't seem to connect. Also, and this is really annoying, when she does start going in, as opposed to how it used to be, because when she first started communicating with Lewis Daynes, he used to refer to her as mum and stuff when she walked in the room and ask her how she was. But now, a year on, when she goes in, he goes silent. And then emojis of things like the Wicked Witch of the West or a goose stepping Hitler would pop up on the screen. So Lewis Daynes is basically taking the piss out of her. It's letting her know, you're not in control here. I know you're there, and I'm gonna let you know what I think of you. That in itself must have been so infuriating for her. Now, on one occasion that I think we can all agree is utterly mind-blowing, Breck basically calls his mum into his room, and she's shown what she describes in her own words as a 2-page manifesto. I kid you not. A 2-page manifesto of all the things he should and shouldn't have to do around the house. All your parents here are like, oh, how would I react if my 13, 14, 15-year-old brought me into the room and they'd created a 2-page manifesto on what they shouldn't have to do around the house? I would imagine it would increase significantly the amount of things that they might have to do around the house. Is that just me? Ooh. You don't think you should have to wash the car? You're going to go and do all the neighbourhood's cars as well now, because the reality is that is very, very frustrating, isn't it? It's annoying. But nonetheless, this is his 2-page manifesto, and it ends with these words. It says, "If you don't listen to the things I say, my good friend Daynes will get me a Microsoft apprenticeship when I am 16 years old, and I will be out of here." By the way, Lauren went and printed off the manifesto, and she noticed at the bottom it said, "Written by Lewis Daynes, edited by Lewis Daynes." So Breck had nothing to do with it. Lewis Daynes orchestrated that and was basically letting her know, if you keep interfering with Breck's life, then I'm taking him from you. In some awful way, some sinister way, that was, in fact, I suppose, what his intentions were. We didn't know that at this point, but it was ultimate control, wasn't it? And the fact that Breck shows Lauren this just demonstrates the kind of wedge that Lewis Daynes is creating between Breck and his mum. You know, she felt like he was being completely brainwashed, and he is being brainwashed, because that's what grooming is about. There is lots and lots of research, you can check it out for yourself, but it is astonishing how quickly paedophiles connect with vulnerable kids online. They have tested where a 12 or 13-year-old child has gone into an adult zone where they maybe shouldn't be, written something, and it's taken about 8 seconds for a predator to connect with them, fully knowing that they're a child. It's not a safe world, the internet, at all. When parents think that their kid is upstairs online and they're safe, they are probably as delusional as they can ever be as a parent. It's full. In fact, there are lots of different statistics, but let's take the NSPCC's. It says that 1 in 20 children will have been sexually molested by the age of 16. However, if you take other research, it says that 1 in 6, and usually that's because of the violations that occur online. So girls and boys who are young being told to send naked pictures and then kind of blackmail with them, and so on and so forth. Like, this is incredibly common. It's a horrible reality, but it's a reality that we need to be aware of. Because if we're going to keep our children safe and we're going to keep our grandchildren safe, then we need to know this stuff. People who groom are incredibly clever. And without a doubt, it does feel like brainwashing. The groomer makes the child feel, firstly, that they are the one and only, that they are the individual who understands them more than anybody else in the world. They usually send them treats and presents. This happens all under the nose of the parent. So things will arrive at homes and parents aren't thinking about it because the child picks up the mail before anybody else because they know that something's coming, and they're getting these presents sent to them. This is constantly researched. We see this evidenced in court time and time again when children have ended up being put in horribly precarious situations or ended up being molested. So Breck has been being groomed for 12 months. That's a long time. He is fully bought in now. And as far as Lauren is concerned, she is growing more and more concerned about this, but less and less powerful. Because the more foundations that Lewis is planting, the more that Breck is buying into this, the weaker the connection that she has over control. She becomes so disturbed by what's happening that she actually contacts the police on the 17th of December 2013.
Good evening, sorry please, how can I help?
Yes, I have a 14-year-old son, and there's an 18-year-old unknown, well, he says he's 18-year-old person, and I feel like he's being groomed. He's being turned against his family and schooling, and it's been ongoing for a while, and I'm getting really concerned that this person isn't actually who he says he is.
Okay, just one moment. Can I take your name?
Lauren, Lorin.
And your surname?
Lefave, L-A, capital F-A-V-E.
I'll take some details. What's your son called?
Breck, B-R-E-C-K.
And is it the same surname?
Oh, it's Bednar, B-E-D-N-A-R.
Okay, and what's his date of birth?
17/03/99.
Okay, and he's 14, is he? Okay. And what's the name of the guy he's been hanging around with?
Well, it's Lewis, L-E-W-I-S, and I've had two different last names.
Yeah.
Let me spell them.
Yeah.
So, one has been Daynes, Daynes,
Yeah.
and that was sort of, I saw it on the computer. And another one was on his phone, was Haswari, Haswari.
Okay, and he's 18, is he?
Says he's 18. We've not met him. He runs a server, and a lot of the boys, there's several 14-year-old boys on this server.
But when you say runs the server, what does that mean?
I don't know. I'm not computer savvy, but that's what I've been told. I was told that he works for the U.S. government and in New York, and now he's moved to Greenwich, and he's made £2 million selling bitcoins and given it all to Syria. So I don't know what to believe, but I don't believe any of that.
So did your son meet him online?
Yes.
And has he ever, did he see him in person?
No, I don't think so. No, he says he hasn't.
Okay. And what sort of concerns do you have then? I mean, obviously there's that age difference, but what is he saying?
He's trying to turn him against everything. He's talking about government. He's anti-government, and he said he worked for the U.S. government and quit because he's anti-government. He said he's given £2 million to Syria because of their crisis.
Okay.
He's against Christianity. He's told my son that he shouldn't be obligated to go to church even once a month, that he doesn't need to go and shouldn't go. So there's religious elements, government elements, and he's grooming him for something because he's trying to change his thinking set on everything. And I've seen some of it on the computer. I've seen it written. I've had a letter written to me by my son, but when I backed out, the author was this guy. So this guy is writing letters on behalf of my son and signing them off as my son wrote them.
And what happens when you speak to your son about it? What does he say about it?
He and the rest of the guys in this group completely look up to this older boy. There's a picture of him, a handsome, maybe 18-year-old boy, but we have no idea if that's his picture. And they all look up to him. But the problem is no one believes that that's really his picture or his.
And do you know what this online group is? What it's called or what it's in aid of?
No. I don't. They do some gaming, but then they do, a lot of talking about anti-government and anti-religion, anti-Christianity. And I'm starting to wonder if it's deeper. Initially, I thought it was a grooming for gay, and now I'm wondering if it's a grooming for anti-government, anti-Christianity.
Okay. Obviously your son's only 14. Can you stop him using this website? I have taken his
computer away. He's going to be completely beside himself, but it's the right thing to do, I know. But he's going to feel like I've ruined his life because I've taken away his, connection to all of his friends.
Yeah. It's difficult for us at this stage. The most we'd be able to do is to make some checks our end, some intelligence checks.
I told you, Lauren did everything right. This is why I've got so much unfinished history with this particular case, because she demonstrates the perfect mother. Like, she rang the police. She expressed fear. She said, I think he's being groomed. So Lauren had kind of thought that maybe this was an older gay man who's trying to force his sexuality onto Breck and maybe onto his friends before they're maybe ready to come to those thoughts and feelings themselves. And also, her worst fear is that this man is at some point going to try to coerce Breck into having some kind of sexual liaison with him. I am so angry about what happened. Because this is where the story should end. I should now say to you, and the police did some checks, and when those checks came back, they called Lauren, And Lauren told Breck the truth about Lewis Daynes. And now Breck's living his life as a young adult, maybe at a festival, having fun. Because that's how the story's meant to end. And that's how the story could have ended if the police had actually made the checks. Do you know what actually happened? They didn't make one check and they closed the case within 1 hour of that call. Put it into context. How long does it take to put the name Lewis Daynes into a database? Didn't happen. And the reason that it makes me angry is because of what I'm going to tell you shortly, but it will make you equally as angry. After that call, his mum decides, you know what, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. She confiscates his computer equipment, and she even creates an intervention where she gets one of his good friends and his good friend's parents to actually sit down with him. And they talk to him about how concerned they are about Lewis Daynes, that they know he isn't who he claims to be, and that they're really concerned about the impact that he's having on Breck. And what she even suggested was, I want to meet Lewis Daynes, because at the end of the day, if he's who he says he is, there shouldn't be a problem. But Breck says the reason that he won't meet you is because you're too judgmental. So he's even created a response for Breck. Can you see that? That Lewis Daynes knew this day was coming where Lauren was going to be like, I need to meet this guy who says he's all these things. And Breck's already primed. Well, he would have, but you are just too judgmental. So I'm going to blame you. How powerful is that? That Breck is so manipulated that he's telling his mother, you are the problem. If you were nicer, Lewis Daynes would totally have met you. You're the reason that your fears can't be allayed. So at this point, Lauren says, well, you know what? That's fine. But that means you have no contact with Lewis Daynes. Now, Breck does agree at this point, and I imagine that Lauren feels a deep sense of relief. And indeed, she talks about the fact at that moment she genuinely thought she'd solved the problem. And for a period of time, Breck seems to return to his normal and appears a lot more carefree, doesn't seem like he's got that attitude anymore, and just really returns to his old self. What Lauren didn't know was that Lewis Daynes had actually made Breck record that meeting on an MP3 player. So that meeting, that intervention, it was all recorded and sent to Lewis Daynes. And that means several things. But one of the big things it means is that Lewis Daynes knows that he can't have the contact with Breck in the way that he'd been having it. And that meant he sent the communication underground. To add insult to injury, because remember, Lauren did everything right, Lewis Daynes actually sends Breck a brand new £600 iPhone so they can start communicating. The power grab there is just beyond, isn't it? But what does that say to Breck? It says, oh my God, Lewis Daynes really cares for me. Lewis Daynes really does have money. This relationship really does have meaning. Think about what the 14-year-old Breck Bednar is thinking and believing. He's not stupid. He thinks there's a chance, a possibility that he's going to have this incredible job, an incredible life. Maybe won't even have to finish school because he's got this incredible friend who's just been there for him so much and understands him so deeply and pays for even a new iPhone for him. That's what online groomers do. Fully alienate you from the people who can save you and make sure that all of your energy is directed in their direction. Breck Bednar has got no idea of the danger he's in. And also, just to mention, it's not just Breck who wants to remain in contact with Lewis Daynes. You know, one of the other friends that's been involved in that gaming group has been back in touch with him. So Lewis Daynes is still reeling in people who've already been banned from having contact with him. So these parents as a group know there is something seriously amiss with Lewis Daynes. But he is so clever. And I think as well, the fact that when you're an adult parent, particularly if you're my age, our life with technology was very different to our children's. So when I went to school, the computer was massive and you were like allowed on it once every 6 months because that's how rare computers were. It's unbelievable to imagine that, isn't it? And then you just had to sit and program it with loads of weird words and then it had just put your name on the screen 40 times. And you were like, God, that's amazing. Do you know what I mean? So like our understanding of technology is very different. But for young people, they're ahead of the game. So Lewis Daynes is ahead of the game. He knows how to make people stay in contact with him, even if they've been banned using other things like computers. You know, phones will do. We know that now. But you've got to understand that for Lauren, she thinks that she's handled this. Another sliding doors moment, of course, is the fact that that boy who was also back in contact with Lewis Daynes could have told his parents, look, Breck's been banned from speaking to him, but it turns out he is still speaking to him. But again, which kid at that age is going to break that kind of confidence, break that kind of loyalty? It just isn't the way that young people are. Lauren actually talks about the last Christmas that they had together as a family being a really beautiful one, that she really felt that Breck was back to normal and that the family was connected and happy, and she even allowed Breck to have his equipment back because it meant the world to him. So she felt like he'd learnt his lesson, he'd made changes to his life, and therefore she was going to trust him again. February half term 2014, Breck gets to go on an exchange trip to Spain and things have been so much better. And Lauren helps him pack and they're excited and he's excited. And she really feels like Lewis Daynes is a person from the past, like a ghoul that's gone. She had no idea when she was packing with Breck that that would be the last time she saw him alive. It turns out Daynes was in contact with Breck pretty much every day in Spain. And one of the things that he was really unhappy about was that Breck uploaded a picture to Facebook of him with a girl. It feels like this was a real red flag as far as Lewis Daynes was concerned. Remember, the worst thing that could happen for Lewis Daynes is that Breck Bednar, a lovely looking young man, could meet a girl, because you know what happens. Boys get really fixated and their interest turns to the girl, and rightly so. So Lewis Daynes would be worried about it. And actually he says to Breck, take the picture down. Oh, can you imagine that? Can you imagine feeling that you have a right to tell a young boy who's put a picture up on social media that you've got to take it down because you don't like it? That shows you how much he was stalking Breck. It's clear Lewis Daynes is absolutely obsessed with him, but Breck isn't aware of it. When Breck gets back from Spain, he's picked up by his father and his triplet siblings because it's his father's weekend to have him. And even though it is Breck's father's weekend, they're actually staying at the family home because Barry lives in a bedsit. So Lauren's away that weekend, meaning that after the airport, they all go back to that house. Now, unbeknownst to his mother or father, Lewis Daynes has been insidiously in contact constantly. And he's suggested to Breck that he needs to come and spend the day with him. Obviously knows that Breck can't say that he's going to go and see Lewis Daynes because it would be an absolute no from both parents. So he sends him lots of excuses. Say I'm Edward Bly, a friend from school, or say that you're going to go and stay with somebody that you stayed with before. You know, just gives him loads of different cover stories. And to some degree, what teenager hasn't done it? I did it when I was a kid, too many times to mention. I told my mum or dad that I was going to go and stay somewhere when I wasn't going there at all. I was going clubbing all night, or on other occasions, I was going camping with random strangers, which looking back, I'm surprised I am still alive. It's what we did. We know it's stupid when we're an adult, but when we're kids, we're like, I want to do it. Just going to create some kind of cover story and it'll all be fine. And that's what Breck does. He's like, I want to go and stay with a friend. And Breck's dad thinks it's a really good idea because he doesn't get out a lot. He feels like he's always online with his computer. It'll be really good for him to actually go and hang out with somebody in real life. Fatal errors happen, don't they? But it's absolutely not Breck's dad's fault that this occurs. But I imagine how he feels about allowing him to go on that trip. Lewis Daynes, of course, is carrying on that I'm a multimillionaire, I can sort you out an incredible job where you'll become rich instantly. That's the narrative he's playing out with Breck. And he kind of solidifies this. Remember, he sent him a £600 iPhone and then he sends him a car. Yep, he sends him a taxi to take him 30 miles. So again, suggests that he's flush with money, doesn't he? And Breck's probably really excited about this because he's going to prove everybody wrong. He's going to prove his mother, his father, his friends wrong. He trusts Lewis Daynes fully. He even takes his computer equipment with him because this is going to be his future, right? So he gets in that car. The other story that Lewis Daynes has been telling Breck simultaneously with all these grand fantasies is that his own personal company has been taken off and that, guess what? It's getting to that stage where he needs to have somebody come in and help. And he wants to hand over this multi-million-pound company to Breck. And that's why they need to meet. Can you imagine what's going on in this kid's head? This guy who's online, who owns servers, who seems to have money to burn, he's telling me his company's working and he's going to hand it over to me? Imagine how everyone will feel when they see how wrong they were and how right I was. So many of us as adolescents feel that way, right? We feel like we know more than the adults and elders around us. I mean, my mum used to bring me up with a saying, you can't put an old head onto young shoulders. And she's so right. Even with my own children, I'll be like, this is my advice. It is the right advice. Follow this advice. Things will be okay. And they're like, okay, not going to do that. And then it goes wrong. And I'm like, did I tell you the advice? And they were like, oh yeah, you told me the advice. Did you follow it? No. Did it go wrong? Yes. Was I right? Yes, you were. Doesn't matter. That happens time and time again, by the way. I know something that my kids should do. They do the opposite. It goes wrong. They still do it their way. It's part of becoming an independent adult, isn't it? Falling on our face lots of times and then in the end realising it might be good to listen to people who know better. But Breck's in that space that we've all been, believing he knows better. And we've got to remember that when we think about our own teenagers. We've got to remember that when we think about our younger sisters and younger brothers. We've got to remember that because actually we need to make sure that we are imparting as much as possible the reality that things that happen to Breck can happen to other people. So this story that I'm telling you isn't just to express the sadness that I feel at the loss of this young man's life. It's to warn you, because that's what Lauren wants to do. She wants to warn people that we need to educate our children because they believe that they know more than we do. And it leads them into territories and situations that they never needed to be led into. And it's hard, like I say, because kids really think that they know what they're doing, but they are ill-equipped to understand. On the morning of Breck's murder, Lewis Daynes sends a car for him at 7 a.m. in the morning. His family remember that Breck walked down the street, and as far as they were concerned, he was just off walking down to his friends or getting a bus to his friends. They had no idea what was going to play out. That car had been booked 2 weeks earlier. What does that say to you about the fantasy that's going on in Lewis Daynes' head? The fact that he pre-booked it. He had no doubt that Breck was going to follow his instructions. He had no doubt. The confidence, the arrogance, the expectation, it's all there, isn't it? And it's terrifying to imagine that whilst Breck Bednar is imagining that he is about to start the journey of his new life, that somebody else is planning his death. On the 17th of February, Breck doesn't go home. So his father is expecting him back because that's been planned. Barry understandably then immediately tells Lauren that Breck hasn't returned and she starts getting in contact with all of his friends. What is utterly harrowing is that whilst they are ringing around friends and trying to figure out where Breck is, his close friends start getting pictures of Breck's body. Basically, Lewis Daynes has taken pictures of Breck's blooded, battered body, covered in blood, and has sent it to a gaming group and put it on social media. This is before the family know anything. This photo is circulating online. And because Daynes knows loads of kids, that meant that loads of young people were completely traumatised by this picture, also aware of Breck's death before the parents or police knew. And what's even more harrowing, if it can be any more harrowing, can it be? I don't know, but it feels like it is, because Breck's siblings were sent messages such as, "I'm so sorry. If your brother's dead, RIP, we're going to miss him, poor Breck," and so on and so forth. They knew nothing about the fact that this had happened, but suddenly they're getting people saying, RIP, poor Breck. Just my stomach, when I say that, just flips over, because it makes me feel sick, that idea that, you know, you're looking for your child, you're trying to find out where they've gone. They were going to stay at a friend's house and have a sleepover, and then people are posting RIP messages and there's a picture going around online. Are you going to want to believe that? You're going to be trying to think, no, this just isn't true, right? But it was. It also turns out that as this picture is going around online, Lewis Daynes is actually creating this version of what happened, saying that Breck's death had been an accident. I genuinely believe that Breck's body was posted online by Lewis Daynes because he just enjoyed the power. He wanted to shock. He knew what was going to come next. He knew he was going to get arrested. There was no doubt about that. I don't think for 1 minute Lewis Daynes did not expect to be arrested. I just think he wanted his moment. This little nobody, this individual who had so little meaning to anybody, he wanted his moment in the news. He wanted his glory. And Breck had been something he had been working on for a long time, and now he wanted to post his work. At 11:06 a.m, Lewis Daynes calls the police.
Essex Police Emergency.
Hi there. Okay. Hello. I need police and a forensics team to my address, please.
What do you mean? What's happened?
My friend and I got into an altercation, and I'm the only one who came out alive.
Are you telling me you've killed somebody?
Yes, I am.
Right, and who am I speaking to?
My name is Lewis Daynes. I'm 18 years old, and I live...
Right, okay. And what's actually happened?
My friend came to stay the night with me yesterday, feeling very down, feeling suicidal. And I woke up this morning, he was in a mess. I tried to calm him down. I hugged him, then said that I was there for him. He shrugged me off.
Can you just bear with me a second? Don't tell me any more, okay? You're telling me he is definitely dead?
Yes, I'm telling you he's definitely dead.
Bear with me a second. Right, okay, Lewis, I need you to just take me back through that again. So what happened last night?
Okay. He came to stay with me because he was feeling down. I tried
What's his name?
Breck. B-R-E-C-K. Bednar. B-E-D-N-E-R.
Sorry, B-R-E...
E-C-K.
Breck?
Yes.
And then his surname is?
Bednar. B-E-D-N-E-R.
Okay, so he came to stay with you.
Look, I can explain this to the officers when they
I
get here.
will just. I need to take these initial details.
I know. He came to stay with me the night. I did my best to comfort him. I woke up this morning. He was in a mess. I tried again.
Right, just slow down again, Lewis. I need to take these details. So, did you have an argument with him last night?
No, we were fine.
You were fighting?
No, we were fine. We were fine last night. We both went to sleep. I said that we were fine.
Okay, but why did he come to stay with you?
Because he was fed up with his home life.
Right, because he was fed up with his home life.
He's had a lot of problems. I've known him for a long time. He came to stay with me. I was in Thailand last week on holiday. He was in Spain on holiday.
Okay.
We both got back.
So,
we met up.
you both went to bed, and then what's happened this morning?
I woke up. He was just standing up. He was in a mess, hands on his face. I got up. I put my arms around him, and I said it was okay. He just shrugged me off and said no. I can't remember exactly what he said. He was going on about how he didn't want to go home. He was fed up with his life, and he didn't want to go.
Right,
and
okay.
I have a penknife on the side of, in my room, adjacent to my bed. I have a chest of drawers. After shaving the TV and stuff on there, I had a penknife on there, folded. He picked it up, opened it, and then lost control.
Slow down. Let me just take those details here. Penknife on the bedside table. Breck grabbed this.
Yes.
What, in order to harm himself?
No, in order to harm me. He opened it and then lost control.
To harm informant and opened it. States he lost control.
In self-defense, put my left arm up to block him from stabbing me effectively. We struggled. I got him to the ground. He got up. I got the knife. Can you not interrupt me with this part?
Okay, go on.
Okay. This is being recorded anyway, isn't it?
Yep.
I grabbed the knife and I stabbed him once in the back of the neck, I believe somewhere near the brainstem. He turned around, tried to carry it on, and I think I stumbled on my chest of drawers. I fell over. I got back up, backed away, and then I don't remember exactly what happened, but the fight ended with me cutting his throat. I believe I turned around and I slashed his throat.
Right.
He fell face first on my bed. I tried to stop the bleeding.
Yep.
He fell onto the floor.
Yep.
I couldn't stop it. His throat was properly cut.
And he's still on the floor?
Yes. He fell onto the bed face first. I was trying to compress the wound at that time. And
Lewis, are you still in the room where Breck is?
No.
Where are you?
Look, don't interrupt me. Just let me explain this if this is being recorded. I didn't know what to do. I felt like...
Right, is the house where you are is where you are and where Breck is, yeah? But you're in another room, are you?
Yes, I felt like taking my own life. I don't remember what happened after that. All I know is I dropped the knife in my hallway. I stripped down and just sat in the shower.
Right, you've left the weapon in the hallway.
Yes.
And have spent how long sitting in the shower?
I don't know. Look, are the police on their way? I can hear something.
They are.
Okay, I'm going to go and do my part. Please, thank you for your help.
Right, just listen.
I mean, can you believe it? Can you believe the arrogance of this human being? That during that phone call, he's basically saying, yeah, my friend was suicidal, I was trying to save him, and then he turned on me, and I just had to kill him to protect myself. Very specifically, I stabbed him in the neck brainstem. I'm not being weird. If that had happened, and let's be honest, stuff happens. People do get killed by accident. That's why we have manslaughter, that's why we have self-defense, etc. But would you be specific? Oh yeah, I just stabbed somebody in the neck brainstem. Just Doesn't make sense. But listen to the way that he speaks. It's shocking, isn't it? He's playing out a fantasy. Cool, calm, collected, considered. He's actually annoyed with the call handler because she keeps asking him questions and he's like, you need to listen to me do it this way. I've listened to the entire call, and it's that constant need to control. He wants to play out the fantasy that he has been living in his head for a long time. Remember what I say about psychopathic serial killers and killers who go out of their way to want to control scenarios. They have a fantasy. The fantasy is what is important to them. The problem with human beings is they are unpredictable. They get in the way. They change their minds. They say things that you don't want them to say. And that's what's happening with the call handler. He's not getting it exactly as he wants it, and it's making him annoyed. So the fact that he's trying to create this bizarre idea that it was all an accident is kind of irrelevant. He just wants to control her. The police go to the flat, obviously. They want to look at what's gone on. And it's clear straight away that they're not dealing with any accident. It's a murder scene. Breck is there. His wrists and ankles have been tied with duct tape. That does not happen in an accident. But also it's clear that sexual activity has taken place. And Daynes is so manipulative that he's actually got all of his computer equipment, his telephones, and he's submerged them all in water. So, like I said, this guy knows that he's in serious trouble and knows he's going down, but he's trying to make it more difficult. And if you had just been involved in a horrific accident, you would be hysterical, you'd be saying sorry, and you certainly wouldn't be thinking, I'll just submerge all of my technology in water to destroy evidence, because you wouldn't need to, would you? Daynes is obviously arrested immediately because it's very obvious he's murdered Breck. Can you imagine being the police turning up to that crime scene? This kid bound with duct tape. He'd been stabbed in his brainstem. His throat had been completely slashed. You know, he'd been horrifically molested. It beggars belief, doesn't it, to imagine that the people come to that scene and a 19-year-old man, just 19, has carried out that killing. And if it couldn't be any more sinister, it was Lauren's birthday. He killed Breck on his mother's birthday. So that every single year, potentially, she can remember the power that he wanted to have over her life, that she could remember the child that she loved so deeply being stolen from her on that day. I cannot say that he definitely chose Lauren's birthday because it would evoke that, but when you think about the level of manipulation he showed, I think it's probably likely. I think it is symbolic of absolute control. When the police explored the history, because obviously they're very good at finding purchases, they discovered that he'd been buying a killing kit for a while, for weeks actually. He'd bought duct tape, syringes, condoms. So this had been premeditated. The trial was set for the 25th of November 2014, and everybody was expecting a lengthy fight because Daynes seemed to make it clear that he was going to go not guilty, right? So the preparation mentally for the family is horrific. Imagine knowing what you're going to have to see and hear and experience. Trials are horrific in murder cases when people go not guilty because they're going to have to see everything. And everyone is waiting for him to utter those words. And yet, at the pre-trial, when he's asked to plead, he says guilty. And Lauren said there was not a sound in the room. You could have heard a pin drop. No one was expecting it. But again, you just have that sense, don't you? That he wanted everyone to think that he was going to make them go through a trial, just to make it as intensely painful as possible, and then choose to go guilty in that moment. He just wanted to be in charge. On the 12th of January 2015, he was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years. Now, that does not mean that Lewis Daynes is going to get out. It just means that he's got to do a minimum of 25 years. I think we can all safely say it's probably not going to be safe for somebody like him to ever be walking our streets again. Whilst Lewis Daynes' history is sketchy, what we do know is that he was born to a single mother, and then she abandoned him and he went into various systems of care. And eventually he became an independent liver at 16. Also, it seems like at some point he inherited money. It's fair to say that Lewis Daynes didn't have a nice life. He didn't enjoy growing up. He clearly wasn't somebody who had a really secure foundation. I'm sure he had attachment issues and abandonment issues. But really, no matter how terrible your life was, that should not buy you into wanting to do other people harm. To some degree, quite the contrary. But I do wonder just a little bit whether Lewis Daynes was absolutely incensed by how loved Breck Bednar was. There is a part of me that feels that he homed in on Breck because he knew that not only did he have a nice lifestyle, he had lovely siblings who were absolutely connected to him. They were very, very close. He had the most loving, secure-based mother who cared deeply, openly, because Lewis Daynes was fully aware of how much Lauren cared because she was always checking in. Imagine being somebody like Lewis Daynes who never really knew what it was like to be valued, cherished, loved, raised up, constantly being aware of this younger boy who had everything that he was never going to achieve. And maybe wanting to use that resentment, that rage, because he felt that he was so much more entitled than he really was, to build this feeling of retribution, to want to take out all of that anger, frustration, abandonment on somebody who he believed had everything. There's a part of me that really believes that that was one of his motivators, that he saw that Breck had what he never would. And so he wanted to take it from him and also punish Lauren, because he wanted to punish women, mothers, because he didn't have one. He didn't have one who looked after him as she looked after Breck. Because Lewis Daynes pled guilty, it means that we don't know the full details as to what happened when he murdered Breck. We do know there was a sexual motive. We obviously know he was horrifically stabbed and had his throat cut, and he had his brainstem impacted on because he was stabbed through it. We appreciate that. He was bound, he was gagged, but we don't know really how protracted the killing was, and I'm sure that none of us really want to know that. But that's why I can't go into detail about the killing, because when somebody goes guilty, essentially they don't go through that and we don't hear about it in the press. Undoubtedly, Lewis Daynes was a paedophile. Undoubtedly, he molested that poor innocent boy, and undoubtedly, Breck died in a really horrific way, and a way that no one deserves. It's sad to also know that Breck was buried on his 15th birthday. That was the 17th of March, 2014. So for Lauren, you know, two very significant dates. The date that her son was murdered was her birthday, and the day that he was put to rest was his birthday. So cruel. Even though Lewis Daynes has been locked away, and even though there is nothing that we can do to save Breck, I think it's really important to acknowledge just how much Lauren did to protect her son. You know, let's just go through a few of them. She used parental controls on his internet at home. She spoke to the school where she worked. She also spoke to Breck's school. She spoke to others who she had contact with, who were kind of more expert in the area of things like online grooming. She got rid of his computer equipment for a week to give him some boundaries. She arranged an intervention with his friends. She even spoke to the local vicar. She reported concerns to Surrey Police. She literally went out of her way to help make sure that situation didn't become what it eventually did. She was also never told by the police that they didn't investigate the concerns, who should have taken her call seriously but didn't. All they said was like, confiscate his equipment, that will just resolve all the issues. And so she went ahead and did that, but that just meant their communications went underground. Now, the police eventually found 3 routers in Breck's bedroom, and Lauren wasn't even aware of them. Because like most of us, as a parent, you're not that tech savvy. Breck was. The biggest problem, though, was the police completely ignored her concerns regarding grooming. She knew Lewis Daynes. was a teenager like them, but he was older. She knew that there was something wrong about the way he responded to her son. And she gave them all the information that they required to protect Breck. Now, the truth is, when they started investigating Lewis Daynes, it turned out he'd done lots of very bizarre things. Like, he'd been sending the gaming group images of beheadings in Syria. Apparently, he said he wanted to do something similar. He wanted to do a copycat killing. That's chilling. Also, the gaming group as a whole used to actually joke that Lewis Daynes was a paedophile. They weren't wrong, were they? Also, Lewis Daynes said that his gay boyfriend had killed himself in front of him. So, telling them really inappropriate information. None of the parents were aware of this at the time. This came out afterwards. Unsurprisingly, Breck's parents eventually sued Surrey and Essex police for failing to investigate their concerns. Why? Because the report just was not handled appropriately at all. They should have been directed to agencies that can help. So CEOPs, which is Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, that would have been helpful. If they had done a simple check on the police national computer system. Now, think about it. When you are a call handler, you have access to all these things. One simple check on Lewis Daynes. Turns out he was accused of raping a 15-year-old boy in 2011. There were actually 2 counts that he was accused of. Also, allegations that he hacked into a victim's account in order to intimidate him from speaking out about the assault. So not just accused of rape, also intimidation. It's worth noting that the victim who I'm talking about there, the rape victim, and his parents got in touch with Lauren afterwards and said, you know what, we really struggled. The police didn't believe us and the school didn't believe us. So again, missed opportunities. And the other thing that Lewis Daynes was accused of was having indecent images of young boys on his computer. One search would have shown that. And imagine what that would have done. Because if Breck had been told by Lauren, the police have been in touch with us, Lewis Daynes has been accused of raping a boy and having indecent pictures of children and even potentially of having intimidated a witness, that would have changed the outcome. Imagine if the police had done that check. Even though Lauren might not have been given the direct information, I'm sure they wouldn't have been able to have said, well, he's been accused of A, B, and C, but she could have been told, yes, he has shown up on our database and we are concerned about the interaction that your son is having with him. We would like to make it clear that we don't think he's a person who's safe to be around. That would have been enough for Lauren to have that conversation with Breck. Now, even though Lewis Daynes is locked away, rightfully so, and you would imagine that would be the end of any relationship between Lauren and the Bednar family and Daynes, you'd be wrong. Because somehow that man has managed to get hold of technology from prison. Okay, I'm going to say, we can't absolutely prove it's him, but it is him. The way he writes, Lauren knows. So I fully trust that this is Lewis Daynes. So Lewis Daynes has actually tweeted from prison. It's unbelievable that they get technology inside. I know they're not meant to, but we all know that you can get whatever you like when you're in prison. Apart from a 2-week all-inclusive break to the Maldives, you can pretty much get everything you can on the outside, inside. Simple as. But he did. And he tweeted that she was neglectful and abusive. That means that those tweets are online. And Lauren got in contact with the police and said, can you take them down? And they were like, oh, sorry, we can't. It's a US platform. So they refused to remove the tweets. In fact, they went one better. They said, you know what you need to do? You need to contact the person who posted them. I can tell you, as somebody who receives a lot of hate online, that there is nothing more frustrating than some absolute coward hiding behind a handle that isn't them, as far as you can't identify them, saying nasty stuff about you and lies, and you can do nothing about it because, oh, it's an American platform. It is wrong. It is absolutely wrong, but it's the way it is. And think about how that is for Lauren. The fact that this man who destroyed her child, who impacted on her life so grossly, had the opportunity to do that. Something needs to change. Also, Snapchat messages were sent to Breck's siblings, threatening to dig his body up, demolish the Graves headstone, and post naked images of Breck online. The things that go through my head when I imagine how I'd want to react if I had Lewis in a room with me, if I was his mother, is probably good that they remain in my head, because you just have this level of violence that goes on in your head, don't you, when you think about what happened to that poor child and what that man sitting in a cell is still being able to do to that family. Okay, police procedures have changed because of all of this. Child sexual exploitation and grooming checklist has occurred for call handlers, so obviously lessons have been learned, but let's be honest, it doesn't make a difference to that poor family. So now the CEOPCs basically understand what kind of questions that they need to ask, talk about isolation, explore what's going on within the family home, you know, what signs they need to see, is your child becoming angry, so on and so forth. So those things have improved. But nonetheless, none of that is going to make a difference to the fact that an absolutely gorgeous young boy had his life stolen from him in the most hideous of ways. And it's also worth noting that Lauren has gone out of her way to do her best to prevent any other family going through this. She has the Breck Bednar Foundation. She constantly goes out and talks about the importance of understanding online grooming. She has taken Breck's death and she has made it her life's work, his legacy, to make sure that other families never go through the same. She is somebody who is iconically brave. I do not know how she has managed to sustain how she has. For all of you who want to know what's happened to Lauren, she's met a new partner. She and the siblings have moved home. They are trying to live their best life, albeit a less life, without Breck. But I think they are testament to resilience that I think few of us can carry. I don't think I could carry it. And she is such a strong woman. She's taken every moment of pain and turned it into power, which is why I wanted to cover this. Like I said, there is little that we can do to protect Breck, but there is everything that we can do to protect our own children. And what Lauren is doing with Breck's legacy is just doing that. So if you have children that are becoming more moody, they're becoming more secretive, they're receiving gifts or presents and you don't really know where they're coming from, don't be silent. Make sure that you are fully engaged in that online world. Do what I've done. If I hadn't have understood what happened to Breck, no matter how much I'm involved in this world and how many young people I've worked with who've been victims of predatory behaviour, I myself would have probably seen one of my children come to harm. My 13-year-old child at the time started to get involved in a game, started to become more secretive, and then I found out because I pressed him, and this guy who was considerably older was sending him all these things for games, and it was clearly costing money, and he was telling him he was the only person that he could trust. And I sat down with my son, and it was really hard for him, and I told him the story, and it changed everything. Like, he shut down all of those games, he stopped contact, he felt really stupid, which he didn't need to feel. But genuinely, if I hadn't have known that this had happened, I wouldn't have been wise to that. So as a parent, as a sister, as a brother, you know, as a friend, make sure that those people that you know are online understand online grooming, because it is massive, dangerous, and in these kind of circumstances, life-changing. I hope that you found today's true crime interesting. Like I said, it's a warning as much as anything else. And finally, I just want to say that I did this for Breck, because I've told his story many times on TV, but I never feel like I've done justice to it as I hope I have today. Thanks for joining me. Tune in again next time. If you haven't subscribed, please do. Just go and do it now. And give me a comment, let me know your thoughts. Let me know if you've been involved in a situation where you've dealt with predatory behaviour online, or whether one of your kids has been affected. And remember, stay safe, everybody. Take care.